Now I'm just going to hand you over to one of my colleagues who I also miss, and it's great to see her here today. Thank you very much, Chantal. So I'll introduce you to Chantal Kobel, who is a Bergen Fellow at the School of Celtic Studies in the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies. Her work focuses on medieval Irish language and literatures and manuscript studies. And she also has an interest in archives and archival history, which is of great benefit to me on many occasions. So I'll hand you over to Chantal now, and thank you, Chantal.
Thanks a million, Margaret. Just get my PowerPoint up. I think my PowerPoint is very dull compared to the last two speakers. I have no fancy videos. I hope you can all see that and hear me.
I can, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the Rare Books group for giving me the chance to speak to you here today. And I hope everyone is well and safe. So when the Rare Books group first got in touch with me in August to speak here today, the infection rate of COVID-19 in Ireland was under control somewhat, and the country was placed at a lower level, allowing libraries, archives and museums to reopen, albeit under controlled measures. During the first lockdown, I was working on a paleographical study of two medieval Irish manuscripts held in the Royal Irish Academy Library, work which was greatly facilitated by digitised images available on Irish script on screen, which Sophie mentioned in her talk. As part of this study, I also needed to examine the materiality of the objects and ascertain the original structure of both manuscripts. But I couldn't undertake this part of the study without physical access to the manuscripts themselves. So it was with great excitement, therefore, that I was able to visit the library in August. And upon arrival at the library, I was met at the front door of the building by a masked, gloved and socially distanced librarian, the lovely Sophie Evans, who escorted me to the reading room and where I was met by the two manuscripts waiting for me. So I was very grateful for that one visit, as it allowed me to make a significant progress in that piece of research. But I'm mindful of the fact that many could not travel to libraries for research visits this summer due to travel restrictions. I had planned to go back for another visit, but not less than 2 weeks later, I think the library was shut again, and here we are now. So I think we can all agree that this new normal is far from ideal for any of us. So this morning, Amy and Sophie have discussed the specific challenges the lockdown and the closures of their libraries has had on their work, how they have risen to meet those challenges, what approaches they have taken to continue their work on the special collections that they are charged with, and to continue providing services to researchers. The closure of libraries, archives, university buildings and research institutes since March 2020 has also had an obvious impact for researchers on accessing resources, especially those of us who work in the humanities, and it has changed the way we work. Working from home, institutional closure and travel restrictions have presented barriers to researchers not only in Ireland, but also those abroad who require access to the special collections here in Ireland. So the purpose of my talk is to give you a researcher's perspective on how the lack of access to libraries and archives during the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the academic community, to highlight the challenges for the researcher and the potential collaborative opportunities that these strange times can present to us researchers, librarians and archivists. So my research area lies in Celtic studies, with my work focusing on the editing and translating of medieval Irish literature and the study of manuscript production and culture. I work in the School of Celtic Studies, Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies, and all of us who work there are in the privileged position of having a world-leading Celtic Studies research library at our disposal. This library is frequently described as the engine room of the school, housing books and periodicals pertaining to Celtic languages and linguistics, history, textual criticism, manuscript studies, and many more subjects central to our work at the Institute. It also houses photostats and microfilms of manuscripts, many of which are held in repositories abroad, and that are not yet available in a digital format. Given the very nature, scope, and content of the library, a reader can go in and pick up any given book off a shelf, open any page, find a reference in a footnote, and then find that book that the reference refers to in the library, thereby facilitating and driving forward our curiosity-led research. Closure of the library and access to these physical collections therefore posed significant and at times very frustrating difficulties in the ability to advance our research questions and to meet our research goals, given that we could not check the sources, most of which are not available as online resources or ebooks. The lack of access had the knock-on effect of not meeting publication deadlines, which is detrimental in the publisher-perish culture of academia, and is particularly frustrating for early career researchers, many of whom are on short-term contracts and coming to the end of their scholarships. So understandably, the lockdowns have seen a significant switch to digital and online work because of the paucity of physical materials. And thankfully, years of curating digital content has provided multiple opportunities for research interaction that has served the academic community well in this time. And the School of Celtic Studies Library likewise has a range of services which provide access to online publications and resources which have enabled the scholarly community to continue with their research to some extent. So for instance, I was able to access the library databases and electronic journals, which permitted me to read a wide variety of periodicals, including, for instance, the journal Eru, which is available on JSTOR. The institutional repository DAR was also very helpful, which aims to provide articles in open access from professors, staff, and scholars of the Institute. The School of Celtic Studies Library also hosts the Bibliography of Irish Linguistics and Literature, the Bardic Poetry Database, and of course, Irish Script on Screen, all of which are essential online resources for research in Celtic studies. Other online resources, such as the Electronic Dictionary of the Irish Language and the Collaborative Online Database and e-resources for Celtic studies, are also central resources for any Celticist editing and translating medieval Irish texts. And of course, the librarians worked diligently behind the scenes to obtain more obscure publications that were not readily available on open access, often going to heroic lengths to track down the requested item. So as part of my 5-year fellowship at the Institute, I'm working on a book project on the medieval Irish Brehon law manuscripts, which examines the codicology, the function, the readership, and the history of these manuscripts. And they're often very complex objects, consisting of multiple miscellaneous manuscripts that are bound together into large volumes. These manuscripts are held in 6 libraries, both here in Ireland and further afield. And the closure of Trinity College Library came as a significant blow, since the library contains the biggest collection of Brehon law manuscripts, and it is this collection that forms the central focus of my project. So when the pandemic struck, I was 8 months into my book project, during which time I had drawn up a structure for my proposed book and a research plan. The second year of the project, that's this year, was to involve a codicological examination of each volume to ascertain the physical structure of each individual manuscript bound into the composite volumes. But with the closure of the library, I was at a loss for how to carry on. After some initial weeks of despair, juggling homeschooling and working from home, as well as with the frustrations of staying within 2 kilometres, I knew a more decisive action was required, and in order for me to make any progress in my project, I had to approach my work in a different way and change research tactics. So although it has not been possible for me to work on the structure of the manuscripts, I have been able to use the digital images that are available on Irish Script on Screen. Thankfully, in 2019, Anne-Marie O'Brien digitised and made available an Irish Script on Screen two of the larger manuscript, Brehon Law manuscript volumes, and in the last few months, another 4 manuscript volumes have gone online. This has allowed me to transcribe marginalia, examine the mise en page, prepare detailed catalogue descriptions, and determine if there are any visible clues to their later provenance. The work on the codicology of the manuscript volumes will, however, have to wait for a post-pandemic world. So the closure of libraries and archives not only presented challenges for us as researchers, but also for those of us who lecture modules that centre on the study of manuscripts and archival documents. I deliver modules in medieval Irish codicology and paleography, and in teaching insular scripts, I use manuscript images from Irish Script on Screen. Long gone are the days of studying poor quality photocopies of even poorer quality microfilms. So Irish Script on Screen is a great repository, and the digital resource allows my students at the click of a mouse to gain access to a wide range of manuscript witnesses and to learn to read and transcribe scripts. And it also has the added benefit of allowing the student to zoom in really closely to certain letter forms. So one might argue that given the digital medium used in the lectures, that the closure of libraries would not pose a problem in teaching this subject. I beg to differ. There is a downside to only working with digital images from a manuscript. Since what you do with a digital image versus what the physical object is going to lack in relation to working with the real manuscript in the library. This is especially true for a student who has not encountered the physical object and only sees a flattened, disembodied and out of context image of one page in front of them on a computer screen. Each semester, I take my students to visit a library where they learn how to handle, study the materiality of and transcribe from the actual manuscripts. And this greatly adds to their learning experience, and they gain a better understanding and appreciation for the physical object as a whole. So the challenge for me this year, both this semester and the following semester, is how do I teach the materiality of the manuscript when students do not get to see the manuscript in person? I've had to think more creatively as to how I can replicate the experience of meeting manuscripts virtually and give the students as close an experience of what a manuscript feels like, or in front of them. I've shared with them many great online videos and blogs so that they can gain an understanding of how vellum and ink was produced. And I even got the students to prepare and make their own quires using paper, making out their own pricking and ruling, so that they get a first-hand experience in understanding how quires were prepared and arranged. I've also shared with them my own experiences of dealing with manuscripts. So moving forward into the new normal, with the possibility of further lockdowns remaining until the successful distribution of a vaccine, how will researchers go forward in a world where collections in physical format may be a barrier to access, where service interactions in libraries and archives may be impossible or no longer preferred, and where collaborative study is shunned in favour of social distancing in a building that can only safely house half the people they used to? These strange times present us with the opportunity to re-evaluate how we use libraries and archives and how we can leverage this crisis to create new and innovative opportunities to not only improve our research communities, but to develop a shared community. So we've already heard from Amy and Sophie about the benefits of blogging and social media, which allows for visibility of collections and can give researchers opportunities to showcase their work on particular items in special collections. Another possibility to overcome the access barrier is for librarians and archivists perhaps to act as our extended hands in consulting manuscripts, whereby we could call up a manuscript for research or indeed for presenting to a class, and to kind of hold a semi-formal Zoom seminar presentation where students can meet a manuscript in a virtual capacity, Now, I suggest that mindful of the fact that librarians and archivists are already under pressure with other tasks and that this might not be so easily facilitated. Anyway, ultimately, the pandemic will result in a large movement towards the digital humanities, online platforms and open access, while physical access is always preferable and to a large extent necessary, especially for the humanities. Perhaps such directions will present us with a nexus of possibilities too, and open up wider participation in our research areas. So just to conclude, I'd like to make this following final point. The pandemic has presented us all with difficulties in our personal and professional lives as we struggle to cope with the circumstances this year has presented. But it has allowed us all to take a step back and reassess what is important to us in our own lives and as a society. This period of limited movement draws attention to things we have taken for granted and gives us the chance to reflect on how we might move towards more productive, equal and supportive working conditions in the future. If there's one thing that this pandemic has done for researchers, is to allow us to gain a new appreciation for the custodians of the collections we work with. The lockdown has really placed a stress upon our dependence on libraries and archives and the professionals that work in them, and helped to make the resources that are so central to our work accessible. Indeed, these professionals never stopped working behind the scenes when the doors closed, but worked tirelessly, as we've heard from Amy and Sophie already, to help researchers while also preparing the work environment for safe reopening. And I, for one, am very grateful for all your work. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chantal. Great. Thank you, Chantal. That was fantastic and lovely to see you. And once again, I think what is coming through quite a lot is how everybody misses the people they work with and the people who create these collections and curate these collections.